Hello, my name is Izzy, and today I will be reading The Little Prince. Chapter 1. When I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book about the jungle called True Stories. It showed a boa constrictor swallowing a wild animal. This is what it looked like. In the book, it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole, without chewing it. Afterwards, they are unable to move. Then they sleep for 6 months while they digest. That set me thinking about all the things that go on in the jungle, and with a crayon, I did my first drawing. I called it drawing number 1. It looked like this. I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups and asked them if they found it scary. They answered, "What's scary about a hat?" But my drawing was not of a hat. It was a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. So when I drew the inside of the boa, to help the grown-ups understand, they always need explanations. This is what my drawing number 2 looked like. The grown-ups told me to forget about drawing elephants inside boa constrictors and to concentrate instead on geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. Which is why at the age of 6, seeing as my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2 had been such a disaster, I gave up on a glorious career as an artist. Grown-ups never understand anything on their own, and it's a nuisance for children to have to keep explaining things over and over again. So I had to choose another profession, and I learned to be a pilot. I flew all around the world, and it is true that geography came in very handy. I could tell the difference between China and Arizona at a glance, which is very useful if you lose your way at night. Over the past years, I've met lots of sensible people and spent a lot of time living in the world of grown-ups. I have seen them at a close quarters, which has done nothing to change my opinion of them. Whenever I met a grown-up who seemed fairly intelligent, I would test him with my drawing number 1, which I have always kept, and find out if he really was perceptive. But he would always reply, "It's a hat." So instead of talking to him about boa constrictors or the jungle or the stars, I'd come down to his level and discuss bridge, golf, politics, and neckties. And the grown-up would be delighted to meet such a reasonable man. Chapter 2. And so I lived alone, with no one I could really talk to, until 6 years ago, when my plane broke down in the Sahara Desert. As I did not have a mechanic with me, or any passengers, I was going to have to make a complicated engine repair on my own. My life depended on it, since I had barely enough drinking water to last for only 8 days. The first night, I lay down on the ground and fell asleep, miles and miles from any living soul. I was more cut off than a castaway adrift in the middle of the ocean. So you can imagine my astonishment when I was awakened at daybreak by a funny little voice saying, "Please will you draw me a little lamb?" What? Draw me a little lamb? I leapt to my feet as if I had been struck by lightning. I rubbed my eyes and stared, and I saw the most extraordinary little fellow studying me intently. This is the best picture I have managed to draw of him from memory. But of course my drawing is not nearly as delightful as the original. That is not my fault. The grown-ups had put a stop to my artistic career when I was 6, and I had never drawn anything other than my 2 boa constrictors. I gazed at him in amazement. I was miles and miles from any living soul. Remember? But my little fellow did not look lost, nor did he seem weak from exhaustion, or hunger, or thirst, or fright. In no way did he look like a child lost in the middle of the desert, miles and miles from any living soul. When at last I found my voice, I said to him, "What on earth are you doing here?" And he repeated, very quietly, as if it were a matter of the utmost seriousness, "Please will you draw me a little lamb?" Here I was, miles and miles away from any living soul, and with my life in danger, but I was so baffled that I meekly prepared to do as he asked, and took a pen and paper out of my pocket. And then I remembered that I had mostly studied geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar, and I told the little fellow, somewhat irritably, that I couldn't draw. And he replied, "It doesn't matter. Draw me a little lamb." As I had never done a picture of a lamb, I presented him with one of the only two drawings I could do. A boa constrictor from the outside, and I was astounded to hear the little fellow say, "No, no, I don't want an elephant inside a boa. A boa is too dangerous, and an elephant takes up too much room. My place is tiny. I need a lamb. Draw me a little lamb." So I drew. He scrutinized my effort and said, "No, that one looks very sickly. Draw another one." I drew. My little friend smiled indulgently. "Can't you see that's not my lamb? It's a ram. It's got horns." So I started all over again. But again he turned it down. "That one's too old. I want a lamb that will live for a long time." I was in a hurry to start stripping down the engine, and my patience was wearing thin. So hastily I sketched this. And I said, "That's the crate. The lamb you want is inside." And I was amazed to see my young critic's face light up. "That's exactly what I wanted. Do you think this lamb will need a lot of grass?" "Why?" "Because my place is tiny." "I'm sure there will be enough. I've given you a very little lamb." He looked more closely at the drawing. "Not that little. Oh, look, he's fallen asleep." And that's how I made the acquaintance of the little prince.